Queens. Themis was a fine young woman and a wonderful student who studied and received her BA at Queens College in art history. As a graduation present, upon graduating from Queens College, her parents took her on a trip to Greece, where she tragically died on the island of Santorini from eating some food that she did not know she was allergic to, and she had went into anaphylactic shock and passed away very suddenly. Her parents, although they were heartbroken, decided to institute the Themis Brown Memorial Lecture in memory of her love for Greek art and language and culture, and then subsequently also gave a very generous endowment to the Byzantine Studies Center to keep her memory alive. So tonight we honor Themis Brown and her parents who donated so generously to the center when they were with us. Our guest tonight, Yorgos Anagnostou, is a professor of modern Greek, as a professor and the director of the Modern Greek Studies program at The Ohio State University. His research interests include American ethnic studies with a focus on Greek America, a topic on which he has published widely. Since 2017, he is the editor of the online open access journal Ergon, Greek American Arts and Letters. He has recently turned his attention to more far-flung interests and has just returned from a very productive and fascinating journey to Australia, which is the topic of his discussion tonight, entitled Greek Melbourne Calling, New Cartographies of Diasporic Belonging. Professor.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. Sto salonimas. It was wonderful to see. I recognize faces. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts about diaspora identity and belonging. I would like to thank the Center for Byzantine and Modern Greek Studies and Professor Katsan for the invitation. Thank you, Maria, for the organizing the event. And thank you, Alexandria Amohostiane, for making this space available. We in the Greek American Studies are in the business of remembering, and also diasporic and ethnic communities are in the business of remembering. So tomorrow we remember two historical events. This is from the Greek-Australian organization called Democritus, celebrating, honoring the pioneer Greek-Australian immigrant women. Tomorrow we're remembering the Castle Gate mine disaster, which killed 171 miners, one of many, many mine disasters in Colorado, Utah, Virginia, and 50 Cretans were killed in the disaster. I took time to honor these victims, and you can find the essay I wrote in the journal Ergon that I edit. My talk connects an Australian city, Melbourne, with Greek identity. It claims that this Australian Greek connection offers something new, which is worthy our attention. It invites us to think of diaspora in terms of cartography. Cartography refers to the making of maps. In the humanities, this involves cultural mapping, the identification of people's tangible and intangible cultural assets within local landscapes. Astoria. The tangible assets include statues, paintings, and archives, among others. The intangible assets involve narratives of identity, music, and literature. Narratives of identity. I will begin my cultural mapping of Greek Melbourne from a broad perspective, that of transoceanic emigration to Australia. I will be sharing a poem by a poetess from she was living in Sydney, but also she was connected with Greek Melbourne, and whom we lost recently. The title is Topos, the place. We traveled in old ships with small decaying hearts, rode on the giant beast, uncertain. Remembered other voyages, and the black depths. Each day we feasted on the past, friends watching over the furniture of generations. Dolphins no longer followed us, we were in alien waters. Migration, a movement process across space, is starkly charted here as a process of distancing one's self from a familiar place. The migrant self is witnessing a gradual removal from the social networks in which it was embedded at home, experiencing a rupture. Now, those left behind will be guarding ancestral continuities. It will be the friends watching over the furniture of generations. The cartography of migration involves a physical relocation and emotional displacement from a familiar place to foreign environment. Migration also involves reorientation in time. What was the migrant's present at home is no longer. It has become the past. Kefalas's poem underlines the all-consuming memory of home. Each day we feasted on the past, as the migrant experiences a transition from the past to the present. The poem sketches an initial emotional and cognitive cartography of the diasporic subject, the diasporic person. The movement across space is crisscrossed with feelings and relations between the here and there, the then and now. The closing of the poem opens a question about what comes next, what futures lie ahead, what kinds of lives will the migrants build, and how will the next generation place itself in connection to the here and elsewhere, the immigrant past and the diasporic present. I will be sharing another poem. The title is Equilibrium, Isoropia. And it has, let's see here. It seems it's frozen and I'm having a technical problem. Yeah. Okay, yay, you're ready. This contributes to the suspense of the presentation. Really engages audiences. It's an interruption as a form of engagement. Isoropia. We're finding balances here. The business of the diasporic subject is somehow to find all kinds of balances. It is written by Irini Papas, the poem, a native Melbourne actress, poet and prose writer. It voices a perspective by and about the second generation. I am the yield of alien soil, born here in Australia. I have learned all I know of Greece from others' lips. What do you want from me? Why do you seek insistently to classify me? It's time you understood that I have not just one, but two allegiances. Neither to one I'm pledged totally, nor fully to the other. My life is rich, richer than yours twice over, because I have found my niche in both. No one can deny me this gift, the ability to live within the one society and the other comfortably. We, who were born here, are quite a separate tribe, and we fit into no one's pattern but our own. The poem asserts a bicultural identity. The poetic persona defiantly resists any demands that impose a singular identity on her person. Her voice rejects the authority of national categories as too narrow to accommodate her diasporic experience. In the verses, identity is for the next generation to negotiate on its own terms. Not a nation or an organization classifying the diaspora, but the diaspora in itself representing itself. The poem's resistance to imposed categories anticipates this phrasing from the renowned Greek Melbourneian writer Christos Tsiolkas. I quote, "It is not that I cannot decide between being Greek or Australian. I don't like definitions." Diasporic identity in this poetic rendering recognizes the multiplicity and the contingency of identifications. This is expressed in everyday language in Greek America too. We routinely hear next generation Greek Americans saying they call us Americans in Greece and Greeks in America. Or in Greece I feel American, and in America I feel Greek. It's not always straightforward to inhabit a hyphenated identity. National categories cannot accommodate it. But let us notice yet another layer in the poem. It extends the scope of diasporic identity beyond the level of the individual. Its last stanza clearly shifts the point of view from the personal I to the collective we. It speaks about the tribe, the group. The poem centers attention on the diasporic group as a distinct cultural entity, and in doing so it interferes with conventional cartographies of diaspora. A diaspora is commonly thought in connection to scattering from a historical homeland and the links that people maintain with that ancestral place and its culture. Indeed, but this relation is only one facet of a broader constellation. Diasporas involve multiple affiliations, connections with a historical homeland, linkages with the immigrant past, and ties with its local institutions and the new home. Diaspora cartographies involve complex constellations of affiliations. Greek-American poet George Economou evokes the image of the two faces of Janus to convey the diasporic position of simultaneously looking to the past and the present, the here and elsewhere. He calls this mode of looking double vision. But where does a diaspora person stand for this multiple looking? The poem Equilibrium places the diasporic person at the center. It is we, the diasporic, we look simultaneously at so many different places and so many different temporal realities, the then and the now. In this configuration, a diaspora stands neither as an extension of what is called the metropolitan center, Greece, nor its periphery. It is one center of Hellenism among others. In this view, the visual metaphor of Hellenism is not arboreal, the scattering of leaves from the national tree. It could be visualized as a galaxy animated via multiple interconnections. So we have multiple centers here: Toronto, New York City, Chicago. In proposing this decentering of Hellenism, the poem offers a new cartography of diasporic belonging. The poem is not alone in positing a diaspora as a center of Hellenism. It is part of a broader sentiment in Greek Australia that calls for its cultural mapping. And here we have the president of the Greek community in Melbourne speaking about Melbourne as, right, an Helleniki metropolis, a Greek metropolis. In autumn 2023, I spent 45 days in Melbourne, Australia, as a fellow at the University of Melbourne. Soon, I was embraced by the city's Greek community as a guest, and you know what that means, hospitality, and offered access to its institutions. The population of the Parrhekia is approximately 180,000 people, and has the largest Greek-speaking population outside Greece. The post-1950s immigrant generation is aging and is leaving us, but the second generation still nurtures living memories of the migrant experience. There is still a high percentage of bilingual speakers among the second generation. Greek was the primary language used during my meeting with the board of the Greek community of Melbourne. I was asked to use Greek language to deliver my talk and radio interviews. The physical and symbolic center of the Greek Orthodox community of Melbourne and Victoria is a skyscraper in downtown Melbourne. It is constructed on the site of its original building, the Immigrant Building. It was built around the late 19th century, and maintains a network of Greek language schools, including a private bilingual school and several afternoon schools. The community recently supported research on its archives for the writing of its history. So again, we will see this theme coming up in the talk, the community investing in its self-understanding and in many ways having control over its self-representation. There are hundreds of regional, philanthropic and welfare social organizations. Still in operation is the Democritus Workers' League, founded in 1935. There is a literary society and at least 2 theater troupes. There are several Greek radio programs supported by Australian multicultural policies. The community organized the popular Antipodes Greek Festival downtown. One of the reasons Greek Melbourne stresses the need to represent its experience stems from a broad sentiment. I quote Nick Dallas, who is a person who is an educational and cultural activist. So to quote him, Greece may not have a true understanding of the different diasporas. They don't understand us. I heard this again and again and again. They're trying to impose their own vision and models on us. Its attitudes, Greece's attitudes are paternalistic. Father familiar. According to an educational reader, Nick Dallas, I quote, maybe Greece and the Greek governments perceive themselves as paternal figures to guide us, the children who have left. This is a passage from Konstantinos Kallinos, a third generation Greek Australian who speaks Koine, Byzantine Greek, Ancient Greek, Greek Chinese. He's an incredible person. And what is interesting, and I will be touching upon this, still Greek Melbourne has a public conversation where people criticize openly the Greek state. So there is a public sphere, as we call it, where people express their opinions and they don't try to sugarcoat things. And here in this case, he critiques the Council of Hellenes Abroad, the infamous SAE. But in many ways, the SAE tried to impose its own administrative vision of the diasporas without understanding the local realities of how diaspora organizations operate. So while cultural exchanges with Greece are sought and appreciated, right? This is in many ways the galaxy metaphor where the different places are connected and they exchange ideas and values and resources. At the same time, major energies are directed towards empowering local institutions. I plan to start my cultural mapping with a broad Greek-Australian project. It is about the work of Effie Alexakis, a Sydney-based Greek-Australian photographer who has earned accolades in both Australia and Greece. For more than 40 years, Alexakis has single-mindedly sought to document Greek Australians, including Greek Melbournians, in a project which includes oral history. Alexakis, a photographer, and her partner, Leonard Januski, a public historian, have traveled across the continent to document the faces and words of migrants and their children. Alexakis frames her subjects in the tradition of portraiture. Her camera zooms on her subject at work or leisure. Its focus brings the viewer into a face-to-face observation of her subjects as human beings. This framing is not merely aesthetic. It does not just concern itself with perspective, angle, shades, and light. As art critics note, portraiture stands apart from other genres of art as it makes the intersection between portrait, biography, and history, hence the collection of oral histories of all these people whose portrait we are presented to view and contemplate. So these photographs then are more than artworks. When people look at portraits, they think they're encountering that person. In this respect, Alexakis and her partner perform political work. Greek Australia has fresh memories of being labeled as woke, a racial slur devaluing Southern Europeans. Thus, the act of humanizing the migrants in photography connects with the politics of representing otherness in Australia, not as types, not as lesser, not as strangers, but as human beings. So in many ways, it familiarizes immigrants as human beings. Historian Antonis Piperoglou adds another layer to Alexakis' choice of subjects. I quote, she takes portraits with her subjects, he notes. She does not merely take pictures of them. Engaging with a range of subjects, she manages to reorient common assumptions about migrant pasts. We see how Greek Australianness is alive in difference. How Greek Australianness is alive in diversity, end of quote. Greek Australianness is alive in diversity. All of us, educators, poets, researchers, artists, community leaders, documentary makers who engage in the business of bringing migrant and diasporic histories and cultures into representation, we confront this question. How do we do justice to the enormous complexities of a diaspora? How do we narrate it in an ethically and politically responsible manner? Alexakis' corpus answers this question in a manner we could call an ethic of inclusion. For her, to document Greek Australia is to recognize its internal diversity. She practices a form of ethnographic realism that renders visible the worker, the cook, the store owner, the entrepreneur, those who marry across cultural and racial ethnicities, and public figures who are known for their non-normative sexualities. Instead of eliding heterogeneity, her cartography foregrounds its images and perspectives. We are far away here from representations of reducing diasporic identities to a single social type, and we do this a lot. A diaspora, after all, is a cultural field crisscrossed with diversity. We're changing medium and genre. If Alexakis produces Greek Australia at a national scale, a mural in Melbourne produces prideful memories at a local level, the neighborhood. The mural is located in the suburb of Footscray, which had a high migrant concentration in the past. It was created by a Greek Australian youth collective called Gitonia. The mural is a bricolage of historical references to Footscray's community, business trades, sports, and entertainment. The rich iconography will most certainly puzzle an outside viewer, and one needs local knowledge to decode it. Images associated with fishing and the fish industry prevail, referring to a major economic activity of immigrants in the past. Visual references to the local football team and athletes are multiple. There is a parent and his daughter and several images of individuals connected with migration. They represent important immigrant figures, I was told. The image of the bouzouki player is an unmistakable reference to the presence of the Greek rebetiko in the neighborhood, and indeed the rebetiko thrives in Melbourne today. The mural incorporates Greek immigrants and cultures in the history of the suburb. How does this unassuming visual representation contribute to a new diasporic cartography? The following commentary, published in a local newspaper, again by Konstantin Kalymnios, the polyglot poet, playwright, Karagiosi, puppet show performer, lawyer. It's one of the most wittiest conversations with Konstantinos, is amazing. The following commentary then by Konstantinos in many ways provides us his perspective on the significance of the mural. Ready? The mural can be interpreted as a profound symbol, as a way of reconfiguring the relevance of Hellenism to Melbourne by moving away from a narrow identification of Greeks via their place of origin within Greece, an increasingly obscure and futile endeavor considering how few of the latter generations identify in any meaningful way with their grandparents' birthplace, to a local identity which is rooted in the experiences and interactions of those who actually live in that area. And here the implicit reference that the Greek Australians will understand is what Greek Australians in Australia call the tyranny of the distance. They're very far away from Greece, and the parents, workers, they cannot travel to Greece. Many of the children are not exposed to the lived experience. We can recall the poem Isoropeia Balance, where the poetic persona says, the narrator says, I have heard about Greece from others' lips, right? So in many ways there is no experiential connection with Greece. So the mural is a non-monumental memorial to the migrants' past. Although it is seen as a memorial to Hellenism by Konstantinos, there is no monumental references to it. There is no Acropolis, no ancient ruins, no whitewashed island villages. Here we witness an unambiguous articulation of cartography that places the local as the diasporic center. The next generation pays homage to a lived-in reality that shaped their migrant parents and themselves as Greek Australian children. So how do we memorialize our cultural past and present? When we think of migrant material culture, we often conjure images of embroideries, musical instruments, folk costumes, opera, photographs, flags, or religious icons. But another element inextricably connected with the immigrant experience is often neglected. I refer to objects utilized for daily meal preparations, pots, frying pans, kettles. In Greek immigrant culture, where homemade food carries high value, those objects not only sustain the family, but contribute to culinary cultural continuity. The cooking ware demands continuous labor, washing, scraping, and maintaining to maximize the lifespan and conditions of poverty. Cooking utensils are a necessary domestic ritual, 7 o'clock, somebody has to wash the dishes, primarily for women, traditionally, and passed down to their children. This mundane reality is memorialized in an artwork entitled The New Order. It is installed in the suburb of Brunswick in the square called the Sparta Place, a transnational space, transnational meaning connecting Sparta, a Greek city, with an Australian suburb. So a transnational space that accentuates the relationship between this locale and the city of Sparta. The bust of Spartan leader Leonidas offers an iconic representation of that relationship, right? And this is a monument of ancient figures that is a common cartography, let's say, of how we think about the Greek past. The New Order also references the ancient past. The installation consists of 5 freestanding columns that evoke ruined remains from ancient Greece. So we do have here the common reference to kind of a modern evocation of an ancient column. But the installation injects a new element to this conventional theme. The form of each Greek-style column is delineated by a cage of galvanized steel, upright and mesh. The cages are filled with recycled kitchenelia, toasters, kettles, saucepans, mixing bowls, teapots, etc., made from various materials including stainless steel, chrome and aluminum. A portion of the kitchenelia was donated by members of the local community. Placed next to the statue of Leonidas, this diasporic public space juxtaposes 2 kinds of pasts. The monumental presence of ancient Greece, a staple of national identity, and a display of humble material culture that connects with the immigrants' everyday experience. The columns monumentalize domestic migrant labor. The classical and the mundane, high culture and low culture, the prestigious and the humble past blur in a manner that some in this audience might call a postmodern cultural expression. But the immigrant past is not idealized. In Melbourne, I attended the theatrical play Byron's Life, an example of the growing up Greek genre. It dramatizes the dilemmas, ambivalences, and anxieties of Greek-Australian male and a Greek-Australian male, who negotiates the expectations of the surrounding migrant culture. His struggle to find a measure of balance, isopropia, between the Australian culture pulling him towards one direction and his old world surroundings towards another. In the poster, we can see the centrality of the immigrant trunk in the family's living room, symbolic of the overwhelming domestic presence of immigrant culture that the next generation must come to terms with and in many ways then it's the diasporic then identity of the second generation is a process of negotiation, rejecting, selectively retaining, embracing, negotiating, again, the 2 cultures that it is called to inhabit. In yet another example, a play written by Konstantinos Kalymnios, όπου γη και πατρίς exemplifies the phenomenon of diaspora exporting its cultural production to Greece. So he wrote, this is hilarious, I saw a trailer, and it's about now a kind of an acculturated from the clothes they're wearing, immigrant couple that now is about to return to Greece for the first time after 40 years. Oops. Okay. The play, Όπου γη και πατρίς, offers a textbook case of transnational diasporic flows. A comedy about the Greek-Australian immigrant experience written in Greek by a Melbourne-based author making its debut on stage in Athens by Greek actors and actresses, and then returning to Australia with performances by the Athenian troupe in Sydney and Melbourne in Greek with English subtitles. Reviews were published in both Greece and Greek Australia. The diaspora is exporting its narratives and re-importing them. A subject for an article, certainly. And the same is the case with Effie Alexakis, that in many ways now she's celebrated in Greece and the Australian Embassy in Greece. Right? So again, we have a diasporic metropolitan center that produces narratives, a play, about the diasporic experience from the perspective of a third generation. And this product now from the Melbourne metropolis goes to another metropolis, Athens. A thriving center of Hellenism produces notable literature. Melbourne-born novelist Christos Tsiolkas has earned international acclaim. His fiction explores intergenerational and intradiasporic tensions and conflicts, but also non-normative sexualities. Poet P.O. is a legendary figure in the Australian poetry scene and a chronicle of Melbourne and its culture and migrations. His poetry performs diasporic bilingualism as a play between languages, coexistence where languages in juxtaposition interact creatively with each other. In 1992, author and educator Helen Nikas founded All Publishing in Melbourne, a venue aiming to nurture, study, translate, and disseminate Greek-Australian literature. Again, the emphasis is on the migrant experience. If you're interested in an essay by hers, we can find it in Ergon. The online magazine Calliope X contributes Greek poetry and supports multicultural and multilingual writings. The literary journal Antipodes, launched in 1974, is the longest published bilingual periodical circulating in Australia. A community cannot claim itself as a center without an understanding of itself. The official community operates a forum, Greek history and culture seminars, for the purposes of sharing scholarly research with the public. Building bridges between academics and the community, the forum features scholars from Greece, the United States, and Australia. Greek-Australian topics are numerous. The series creates a public forum for discussion and debate, contributing to a self-reflexive public sphere, though the in-person attendance has decreased significantly after COVID, and you can find all the programs recorded in their website. An indicator of the community's support of academic work is contributing to the establishment of a senior Hellenic lecturer in global diasporas in the University of Melbourne, the first of its kind. And the community was very much involved in various ways in enabling this position for a person who will be exploring the Greek diasporas comparatively. And we have tried to, in many ways, circulate this, because in many ways the making of a chair on Greek diasporic experience and culture is the first of its kind in the globe. And if I have one agenda here today, is to really promote the need for Greek American studies at an academic level. We need to invest into understanding our complexity and go into the archives and recover all kinds of interesting stuff. Bright moments and dark moments. Melbourne's diasporic identity raises the question of its relations with Australia and Greece. In the interest of time, I will only identify one thread: civic engagement, by which I broadly mean historically knowledgeable citizens displaying an interest in the issues of the polis. In relation to Greece, this civic component was performed in the community's language schools to honor the 50th year of the student uprising in the Athens Polytechnic against the dictatorship. That was last November. The schools spent an entire year since 2022 to perform this commemoration through plays, songs, essays. It's a very rich engagement. The commemoration involved songs, plays, and visual representations around the theme of commitment to freedom, right? So the commemoration moved away from political parties in order to foreground the quote-unquote universal theme of freedom. The events cultivate historical memory and convey the civic message of active opposition to authoritarianism. And we will never cease needing, but we will be needing this opposition. Authoritarianism comes with all kinds of different ways. So διάβολος έχει πολλά ποδάρια που λέμε στα ελληνικά. In relation to Australia, and I should mention there is something also we may wish to discuss. The community also has secular schools, right? And this is a non-parish school, but it's the community's secular school. So that's a major issue that we may wish to tap on. In relation to Australia, Greek diasporic citizenship was expressed in connection to a 2023 national referendum where citizens were asked to consider the creation of a consultative body to the federal parliament and the federal government, which is to give advice on issues affecting the lives of Indigenous Australians. The community participated in the national debate via at least two platforms. The first was a talk sponsored by the Greek community of Melbourne entitled Greek Lives on Indigenous Lands, Community Responsibility and the Ethnic Experience of Coloniality. And here again, we do have the creation of what I mentioned, public sphere. You're creating a forum to speak about an issue that many people have strong political ideas, then you create a forum to discuss and learn and debate in a civic way, so that then you operate as, again, a learned, educated citizen in matters that concern everybody. Diasporic citizenship. The second was the participation of Greek Australians in a rally supporting the referendum under the banner of the diasporic identity. The equivalent would be Greek Americans for Black Matter situation. Here we witness an expansion of what it means to be diasporic. Sectors of Greek Australia do not see themselves as merely an ethnic or ethno-religious group. They do, but there is more to it. They engage politically as diasporic citizens who are involved in understanding and shaping their home society. They are acting as agents, shaping their country, their home. As I start moving towards the conclusion, Greek Melbourne offers an example of a diaspora-centered identity project. A critical mass of artists, authors, and educators engage with the community's history and contemporary culture. It is a form of labor. We could call it cultural activism that creates a multifaceted cartography. It consists of staging plays, designing murals and installations with Greek Melbourneian themes, exhibiting photography, organizing film festivals, creating venues for literature and poetry, and coordinating community sports and seminars, hosting academics, the way we do it here. This work explores and expresses the migrant and diasporic experience from the perspectives of those who have lived it, and makes effort to sustain a rigorous public sphere to reflect on the issues it confronts. It is a practice directed towards autognosia, self-knowledge, and critical self-reflection. It is guided by the ethic of inclusion, the production of historical memory, and broadly, the cultivation of cultural education. Diasporas require vast cultural and material labor for their production. We know this all too well. In fact, we should think of diaspora as labor. This is because diasporic institutions and identities cannot be taken for granted. diasporas continuously negotiate new conditions, respond to new challenges, and in turn need to reinvent themselves anew. They require the involvement of the next generation. It is this condition that feeds a feeling that is essentially is an essential component of diaspora, the concern, even anxiety about its future. It's a common theme. What will happen next? A recurrent topic of conversation among Melbournians I spoke with was precisely this concern. Will there be a new generation of journalists, artists, scholars, and educators to keep documenting, reflecting, and interpreting the ever-changing diaspora? Who will be creating and curating the archive? Will there be a museum and a center of diaspora studies? Will there be rigorous public deliberation and debate on these questions in the media, cultural commentary, and identity narratives? Will the ethic of inclusion persist, or it will be eclipsed by a one-dimensional representation? The happy, entrepreneurially successful Zorba, the diasporic Greek. Will there be a public invested in this kind of self-reflection? Will there be a public interested in these questions? We are preoccupied with cultural reproduction, but do we really understand the next generation? 2 weeks after returning to Columbus, I received several packages of books mailed to me by Helen Nikas, the literary critic and editor I mentioned earlier. They contained the corpus of her lifetime's work as an editor. Oops, I will skip this. It cost her about $200 sent to me. Moved by this gift, I created a special section in my library to host it. The books represent tangible, material evidence of a life devoted to expanding the diaspora's literary cartography. I often touch the spine of each book she gifted me to make a tactile connection with a tiny sample of a diaspora's vast but underexplored archive. I ask myself, what do we owe to this archive? And more broadly, what is our obligation to the Greek diasporic presence and future in any global city? What is our responsibility as diasporic citizens, educators, and institutions? What kind of cultural projects do we deem worthy of Greek New York City? There are no easy answers. Greek Melbourne offers a vision of inclusion and the importance of diasporic labor in arts and learning to assert a robust cultural presence in the fabric of a city. Cultural activism is paramount in this project. Greek Melbourne reminds me, but it cannot be done without institutional support. Artists, educators, archivists need institutional support. How we go about this, about creating a robust cultural presence, requires another conversation, yet another layer of cultural labor. And in many ways, I would think, and that would be my next project, is rethink a new paradigm of Greek-American distinction and cultural prominence. Until now, we are celebrating the successful entrepreneur. Fine. Mobility, socioeconomic mobility, fine. There's another way to really start reinventing ourselves after about 140 years in this country. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to the conversation.